RPV TV presents Studio RPV, the Peninsula's local news show with co-hosts Maria Sorreo and Liz Brown Swanson.
Hello, and thanks for joining us today on Studio RPV. I'm Maria Sorreo.
And I'm Liz Brown Swanson. Thanks for tuning in.
It's always great to be with you. You know, we thought we would change it up today just a little bit in lieu of the fires in Altadena and in Pacific Palisades. We wanted to really share some emergency preparedness information with all of you. So, Liz, let's dive in because this is so important to really get as much information out there to the residents and the viewers as possible.
And you know, right here in our city of RPV, we are so focused on preparedness,
Yes.
making sure there's resources and our community is ready, and as long as you know our neighbors are ready, we're ready, and there's so much to think about.
Yes.
And you had a lot to think about, you know, as we witnessed
I did.
the horrific fires in LA. You were close enough that you didn't know if you were going to have to evacuate. Talk about your own personal story and how it impacted your thinking about being ready.
You know, what's interesting. We've talked about ready, set, go forever. And ready, set, go means go is really the first. If the fire's very close to you, they just say evacuate right now, grab yourself, your pets, whatever, and get out. Set means you have some time, go through your house, take what you want, pack it up, put it in your car because you could have to leave at any moment. So ready is really where I was. I was a half a mile from the second, which was set go. And so everybody in my apartment complex, we were down from Ventura Boulevard. I guess it was the Pacific Palisades fire, in Encino. There was at least 4 miles up the mountain in Encino that they were evacuated. But everybody on the other side of the boulevard, including me, was not. But I'm going through my apartment and I'm thinking to myself, okay, what do I have time to pack? What do I want to take? And inadvertently, you're grabbing things and thinking, I don't really need 5 of these. I don't really need this. I don't really need that. So I had some time. I ended up packing about 4 or 5 bags, and it really makes you think, okay, put them in my car, get ready to go. And it's very weird because you just don't really know what you would be grabbing, and you have to really kind of think about it. And I was lucky that I had time to think about it. But the one thing that I didn't have, I had 2 cell phones and I had chargers that did not work because we lost power for almost 2 days. That was the scariest thing. So my neighbor told me about power banks. I went to Target and I bought these. And this will save you for 2 or 3 days to keep the power going on your phones. And we don't think about it. We plug the power in the wall, but you don't have hot water if you don't have power. You don't have electricity. Luckily, because of what Liz and I do, we have a lot of camera equipment in our homes, and I had huge studio lights. So I was able to, my apartment lit up like a candle. Mm-hmm. So I was lucky to have light, but I didn't have power. And it was so scary to not have news, not be able to, because I didn't want to drain my phones. So I did go out, I bought these power banks, and I cannot stress this enough, go and get them for yourself. Maybe I was a little late to the power bank party because I know a lot of people that said, oh, I have several of these in my house, but really it was a huge, it made me feel better just to know that I could go on, look at a news, go on to watch duty, whatever you needed just to be informed. So that was really important. There's just little things that you just don't think about until we're all faced with this. And I know that we're in the high fire severity
or high fire hazard severity zone here, really all of Southern California.
It really is. Yes.
That's the reality, and especially with the winds. And so,
yeah,
what we all need to do is our part. You know, starting right at home, like you said, being prepared, having your go bag ready, with the essentials. You know, obviously food, water, prescriptions. There's it can be overwhelming, right? The whole list.
It is,
and kind of knowing where you need to go, and how you're going to evacuate, and having a plan. All of that is how you need to just spend the time so that you're ready when it happens.
And I loved the 6 Ps. There was up in our elevator, our manager put this up, so it was people, pets, prescriptions, and that includes things like eyeglasses, hearing aids, things like that you might need. Personal items, maybe jewelry, things that are important to you, papers, a few photos if you have time. Phone numbers, and they're usually all in our phones, but some people write them down, put them in different places, so you want to make sure that you have those 6 Ps. So I thought that was really helpful because maybe it kind of helps you to remember the Ps of what am I leaving out? What do I need?
Right.
So and anything like that is always helpful for me.
So, and of course, like when this was all taking place, I actually was on the East Coast visiting family, so I was watching the news 24/7, obviously talking with you, worried for you that you were so close. But thankfully we're okay.
Yeah.
And also through, it makes you think like, what am I going to do? Like, how am I going to be ready? And at the latest city council meeting that was held, the acting fire chief, or the assistant fire chief, excuse me, Brian Kane was there to address residents' concerns. Because let's face it, when we're watching this, they think, what if this happens on the peninsula?
Exactly.
How ready are we? So I had a chance to talk with him, ask him questions that residents were concerned about, like, do we have enough water here?
Right.
What do we do to have defensible space, and those kinds of questions he answered. So should we take a break?
Absolutely.
Let's join with Chief Kane.
Assistant Chief Brian Kane. I've been with Los Angeles County Fire Department for 26 years. I am currently the Assistant Chief of Division 1. Division 1 compromises 3 different battalions. Battalion 14, which is the Palos Verdes Peninsula, inclusive also of Catalina. So I will be speaking to the council. I'm going to give a briefing on the incidents to the north, both at the Palisades incident and the Eaton incident. I'm going to talk about some of the challenges that they experienced in both those incidents and how those challenges relate to the Palos Verdes Peninsula and how we're going to try to mitigate those should we face the same conditions here as they faced there. But as it relates to fire-related safety on the peninsula, the most significant things that the residents can do here are, first, knowing what your zone is. The Genesis program, you might have heard about this program. It's an evacuation-based program. It's a zone-based. The peninsula is broken up into respective zones. It's very important for people to understand the zone in which they live should we need to call an evacuation. The Genesis platform is available to anyone, either in a desktop version or an application-based app that's on a mobile device. It's very easy, it's very intuitive to work with. So knowing that the zone that you respectively live in is going to be imperative should we call for an evacuation. Secondly, we've been hearing this for years and years and years, and that's the Ready, Set, Go program. That's the brush clearance and hardening your home. That's going to be coming up here in the spring. All of those resources are available on lacofd.org. You can download that program. It'll tell you all the clearances and respective heights and cuttings for your vegetation on your respective property. And it'll give you tips and hints on how to harden your home should that wildfire front come through in ways to mitigate, flying embers through the air and so forth to protect your home should that scenario happen. So those are the 3 biggest things that you can do. I would say the final aspect to that would be having a go bag ready, just in case we should call for those evacuations. Having that go bag ready next to the door with your most precious belongings, paperwork, wills, all those necessary items, taxes and so forth, that you can just leave rapidly without having to search for those things prior to leaving, would be also a very, very good tip for leaving your home in a quick manner if your respective area comes under that evacuation that's mandatory. So as it relates to the water, the system in the Palisades was a completely different system as it relates to where they get their water from, how the water is fed to the Palisades area. The tanks that they use that end up being a gravity feed to the Palisades community, and then the piping that leads to those tanks for the repumping and the refilling of those tanks. As it directly relates to the firefight in the Palisades, what was happening was so many fire engines were attached to the grid system. We were basically pulling more from the system than the system could provide. So to put it in perspective, one fire engine can pump up to 1,500 gallons per minute, and that's just one, and we had hundreds of fire engines attached to that grid system. So with that being said, you can see how we could easily overwhelm a water system. Here on the peninsula, I've been assured from Cal Water that we have a multiple feed system, meaning we're not dependent on just water coming in from one direction. There's multiple sets of pipelines that are feeding the peninsula at all times. So if the demand should happen that we need to attach hundreds of apparatus to the grid system, the feeding system that supplies the grid will be able to accommodate that additional draw that we put on that system.
Right. I've been with your firefighters on the peninsula when they've been doing wildfire prevention training. Talk about how you get prepared.
So we're always training and we're always prepared, especially up in this peninsula area. So wildland firefighting is very different than structure firefighting. It's a whole different set of tools. It's a whole different set of procedures. So here we're very focused on wildland fires, which means there's constant training. We're always going over our standard operating procedures and our standard operating guidelines, and we're participating in drills not only on the peninsula, but other areas of the county to make sure that our skills stay fresh and stay solid. So getting ready is, one of the things that we like to say is, if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. So, and that's the kind of motto that we like to hold as LA County Fire Department.
And you were ready, and you also had to assist with what happened with the Palisades fire, right? You said that you did send an engine over to help.
Yes, so what we do is we configure strike teams. A strike team is a series of 5 engines that also leaves with a leader. So a group of 5 plus a leader, which is a battalion chief, is a strike team, and we send those out in that configuration. And that's how you can utilize the most resources with the least amount of overhead. So there is an engine on the Palos Verdes Peninsula that is part of a strike team. So it was sent on that initial phase. What we do as a department, especially in areas like the peninsula that are considered very hazardous, is once that engine leaves on that strike team, we will bring a reserve apparatus back into that respective station and call in personnel from home to restaff that engine to make sure we maintain staffing levels on the peninsula at all times.
Liz, I think it does make you feel better to hear from Chief Kane, because he's giving us so much information, and you need that. You need that, that voice of experience, and he knows and thinks differently than we do, because I think it's that panic that sets in for a lot of people, and he sort of alleviates that by giving us good information.
He did. He had about a 20-minute presentation to the city council, and that was a packed chamber at the meeting, and that will be running over and over on RPV TV, because we can't hear it enough about what we need to do. And I think it was to hear him be more assuring about the water on the hill.
Yes.
And that we're well staffed, we have resources, and we partner, all the peninsula cities are partnering to make sure that but we also have to keep doing our part. And I think that's what he emphasized.
Yes.
You get that go bag ready and know your plan, and we can't say it enough.
Right. I mean, keep the brush clearance around your home. There's so many things that we hear about, and you're like, yeah, I'll get it, I'll do it, I'll later, And
yeah, and what also was brought up too at the meeting, because we are a high fire hazard severity zone, it's really impacting ability for homeowners to get insurance. Our city, if you go on rpvca.gov, you will find you can download a letter that emphasizes what we are doing as a community to be prepared and do wildfire mitigation measures, and that's going to help with your own rates, et cetera, when you're trying to get your insurance, and to show that what we do as a community. We have the goats out there. We do all our own ways to make sure that we're dealing with our brush in the city. So
that's so important.
As we say, though, we are RPV together.
That's it. Another thing, too, is go through your home and take pictures of everything. Somebody suggested that I do that, and I'm thinking, I have never done that before.
I haven't done that.
So there's just so many little things that if they're done, you're going to be able to breathe at least a little bit of a sigh of relief, just to know that you're a little bit more ready than you were before, for sure. I was glad that I could share my story about getting ready to evacuate. Thank God I did not have to, but our next guest, who works in the Emergency Preparedness Department here at the city, did have to evacuate, and you're going to hear her story coming up. So don't go anywhere. You're watching Studio RPV. Will you be prepared when an earthquake hits? In Southern California, it's not a matter of if, but when an earthquake will happen. You may only have seconds to leave, so consider getting an emergency go bag like this one. Here you will find a 3-day supply of water and non-perishable food, light sticks, a first aid kit, an emergency tent and blanket. Other supplies you should have in your own go bag include a battery-operated radio, extra batteries, a charger, a flashlight, extra clothes, cash, medications, and any medical equipment you may need, such as hearing aids or reading glasses. It's also a great idea to keep shoes and a flashlight next to your bed in case an earthquake happens while you are sleeping. And for more information, you can always go to our website at rpvca.gov. We're always here to help, and remember, we are RPV together. And joining us from the Emergency Preparedness Department in the city of Rancho Palos Verdes is Luna Mohammad. Luna, thank you so much for being in studio with us today.
Thank you for having me.
And we appreciate all you're doing to help protect our community, especially now where there's so much going on.
Yes, and I know that you live near the fire in Altadena. You have a personal experience, so please share with us and with the viewers, because I think that It's so important to realize these are real people and not just something we see on television and can't really relate to, but you certainly did.
Yeah, definitely. So I've worked in emergency management for 8+ years now. This was my first evacuation. I did have to evacuate because of the Eden fire. There was an evacuation warning, but the winds and the fact that the fire was rushing down the mountain made me want to evacuate. As I was driving home, I saw the fire, and I had not received an evacuation warning or order, but I understood that we had high winds, a very, very risky weather situation going on. So when I saw a fire close to my house, which I would recommend everyone does, I went home immediately and I started prepping my stuff. I did have my go bags ready. I did sort through them and say, hey, some of this stuff is more like personal protective equipment, and I took it out and grabbed the stuff I just needed, like my clothes, my charger, a couple snacks, important USBs with my important documents, which was password protected and encrypted, by the way. Yeah. And I started packing up my car. And this is before anything came out. By the time my car was packed with all my important documents, all my sentimental jewelry, and all of the things I felt like I needed to evacuate with, I got the warning right about then. So if you need extra time, you should leave with a warning. Right. I was already ready to go. Car was gassed up. All my stuff was fully charged because the second I heard fire weather, I said, charge everything.
So smart.
And so I basically told my partner, and we have a 13-year-old, I was like, hey, we can wait a minute, make sure everything's good, but the second there's an order or we feel unsafe, we have to leave. So had our N95 masks on, looking at the fire coming down the hill. The power goes out, the fire's getting closer, still no order, but the order's 1 block away from us. And at that point, we said, let's go. We did have family in the area, but we decided to try out a hotel for one night and then play it by ear from there, see how the fire's going. So we ended up going towards Orange County to try to avoid the wildfire smoke. Really, really toxic. The fire is a horrible, scary beast, but the smoke, it's treated less dangerous than it actually is. So we moved away from the wind, stayed in a hotel for the night. I was using what I know a lot of people are using, which is watch duty,
yes,
along with UC San Diego's alert wildfire cameras, along with looking at the NASA heat maps. And I had my local alert system. So I was getting alerts, evacuation warnings, and information from all these different channels. During an emergency, your energy is up, the adrenaline's up.
So true.
So I was keeping my eye out, but we were in a hotel, so we were able to sleep safely. We ended up staying with family the next night and then heading home as we saw that the evacuation orders around us were starting to be lifted, the weather was improving, and it looked like there was containment, meaning the fire department had held the line against the fire in my area,
right,
thankfully. Unfortunately, many other areas were still and are still dealing with it, although the containment has grown. So we did go home. I left everything packed until all the orders were lifted, and I felt fully confident that we were no longer in risk. And the only thing we're still dealing with is school closures, which can be very challenging, but just having some plans ahead of time with that can also be really helpful.
This is what you do, emergency planning.
Yep.
And of course, I've heard, emergency planners say when you're planning for an emergency, when it's happening, you're not prepared.
No.
And you also mentioned the word scary. And I watched you actually she helped train staff. I remember you saying, use the word scary, but you can feel less afraid if you are prepared.
Yes.
So what do you want residents to know, especially the lessons being learned right now from the LA fires, that you can share with our preparedness here on the peninsula?
Absolutely. The first thing, stay vigilant. Sign up for Alert South Bay, alertsouthbay.com, type alert SB to 888-777. Either way works, but knowing when an emergency is going to happen is key. A lot of people, most people in LA County received wireless emergency alerts called WIAs, which are not an opt-in system. But that won't always be sent out. And if you're not in the area and your loved ones are, you won't receive those. So signing up for the opt-in system, the Alert South Bay system, is really important. If you see something, say something. We got Pano AI cameras. We do have heat maps and fire maps and we have patrols, so we do remain vigilant, but as much redundancy as possible is what's ideal. So again, you see something, say something, call 911 if you see something like smoke that might be a brush fire, and then get yourself ready. And I think the best way to do that is to run a drill. Pretend like you have to evacuate and walk through and say, what do I need? Where would I go? Well, what if that person doesn't answer? What if I have to go somewhere else? How will I get there? And play this scenario. And it is really scary when an emergency happens, but you're right. It's a lot easier if you practiced. And if you think that's true for adults, it's 1,000 times more true for children and animals. Your children, especially your young ones, if they feel a drill is like a game and they're able to practice, they're not going to be impacted mentally by the disaster because it was a game. We do this every 6 months. And so, yeah, I have my bag and let's go. And we have our games and it becomes something easier and puts their mind at ease along with animals. If your dog is used to getting in a crate, you're going to have a lot less difficulty evacuating them than if the first time you're doing it, you are terrified. There's fire, there's ambulances and noise going on, and you're trying to get them in a crate.
I know, Maria, when you mentioned, we hear this constantly. I mean, Southern California is a high fire hazard severity zone. Yes. And really, when we say fire season, it's every day of the year. Of course, there was red flag warnings with the Pacific Palisades and Eden fires were going on, the worst case scenario. Right here on the peninsula, we're talking about preparedness, and the key is also about evacuation. And I know a lot of people saw what happened with roads getting clogged. And what do you want to tell the community now about how will they know where to go? And we can talk about Know Your Zone.
Yes.
So a few things. That Alert South Bay will send you an alert. If you need time to evacuate during a warning. If you don't, just be ready if you get an order. When we send out an alert, we may mention zones. So we do have a Know Your Zone campaign, and we use a site called pvpready.gov. On there, we have preparedness information, but we also have the Genesis map, which has the pre-designated zones that the city has worked with the peninsula, the region, the fire department, the sheriff's department. So we've worked with all these different first responders and these agencies to develop these zones. And basically, your address is connected to a zone, and that's how we tell you to do something life-saving. And it might not be evacuate. Even in a wildfire, it might not be evacuate. It might be shelter in place. Find an open area. Here's the open area you need to go to because the roads are clogged, or evacuate through this way. We won't tell you that ahead of time because it's going to be incident specific. Right. If all the roads are jammed, you would need to go to a temporary refuge in a place where the fire can't touch you. And if the fire is moving west or north or south or east, that's going to help us figure out what's the safest way to go. But that alert is how we're going to get that information to you. And that site is how you're going to be able to actively go and find that information.
Go ahead. I was going to say about resources available and partnerships at the January 25th City Council meeting, January 21st City Council meeting, getting ahead of myself. You had an agenda item that you were a part of, which was now we are, starting up that partnership we'll have with organizations like the Red Cross and the Salvation Army to help also with resources are needed. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. So the Red Cross and the Salvation Army are two amazing nonprofits who are leaders in disaster relief services. So it's only natural that we would want to work with our partners to try to be more disaster ready. With the Salvation Army, we did enter into agreement to utilize their campus when available during an emergency for sheltering and other services. Like feeding services and supply pickup or distribution points. So depending on the incident, we may use them for those services. They've worked for decades providing a lot of different types of services during disaster, so they're very well equipped to support and happy to. Great partners. And then the Red Cross, they are our #1 in the United States emergency sheltering partner, along with doing everything from blood donations to helping with small home fires to supporting every type of service in disaster relief. We work with them on shelter trainings, like we mentioned a second ago, but we also utilize them to help run the emergency shelter. So they would take lead on that, staff would support, but the agreement we entered into with them was to basically inspect and agree to utilize our city facilities that were inspected and approved for emergency facilities, whether it's a shelter where you sleep or a center where you just get information and catch your breath before you go to your next location, so that they can use it by our request in an emergency to help support the public.
And they're also very safe places to donate money. People often want to donate during, a fire emergency. So Red Cross and Salvation Army, always a good place to go. Luna, thank you so very much for coming in studio and sharing your story. I'm so glad that you're okay and that you're back in your home. It's such a relief. And thank you for sharing with the community. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank
Happy to be
you.
here.
Yeah, thank you. All right, you are watching Studio RPV, and we'll be right back. Will you be prepared when an earthquake hits? In Southern California, it's not a matter of if, but when an earthquake will happen. You may only have seconds to leave, so consider getting an emergency go bag like this one. Here you will find a 3-day supply of water and non-perishable food, light sticks, a first aid kit, an emergency tent and blanket. Other supplies you should have in your own go bag include a battery-operated radio, extra batteries, a charger, a flashlight, extra clothes, cash, medications, and any medical equipment you may need, such as hearing aids or reading glasses. It's also a great idea to keep shoes and a flashlight next to your bed in case an earthquake happens while you are sleeping. And for more information, you can always go to our website at rpvca.gov. We're always here to help, and remember, we are RPV together.
As we begin to wrap it up here on our Studio RPV program focusing on emergency preparedness and fire safety, I just want to say a big thank you to all of the first responders.
Amazing.
And the emergency personnel that are out there, and protecting us 24/7,
Yep.
the firefighters, we can't thank you enough. And I know our community is trying. They want to support, they want to help, and there's different ways you can do that.
So many different ways to do it. And by the way, the firefighters are just true heroes. The work that they do, some of them are out there on the ground, dealing with the brush, clearing it out. I mean, they're working so hard, so incredibly hard.
Right. We always say, what do we do when there's fire? We run
This
way.
way. They run
They're going
to it.
towards it.
Yeah,
And,
they're just amazing.
We can't say thank you enough.
Yes.
And one of the organizations that our city website had posted about is laworks.com.
Yep.
You go on there, and it gives you all kinds of ways. You can go and make food for the victims of the fires, first responders, donate clothing. Because I did talk to Chief Kane about this, and as though you're so grateful,
Yeah.
but at certain points they're overwhelmed when all of a sudden they're getting cases of food dropped off to the station. So there are definitely great ways that you can
Help.
donate, like go through the Red Cross, we were saying, as
Right.
we were talking about the Red Cross
Yes.
earlier. And you said with your own sports life, where the Dodgers...
Well, actually, all professional sports teams in Los Angeles, I know you were out of town, but they all got together and set up different donations. And I know the Dodgers on February 1st will host their Fan Fest, and they do something called a yard sale. And during the yard sale, the proceeds are going toward the wildfires, prevention, the firefighters, whoever needs it. So that's going to be a great thing. But really, the sports teams have been ongoing, just trying to help out with this. And you want to make sure you're donating not to something that's a scam or that isn't legitimate. So if you know somebody who was affected by the fire, so many of us do, give to them. Maybe give them, some people don't like to give cash. Give a gift card, just something that they can use to help to put their life back together, or like we said, redcross.org, somewhere where you just know it's legitimate and it's going to be helpful for people.
Yes.
I think it's the most important.
It's been great being here with you. We
You
hope
as
we've
well.
helped our community become more prepared and ready, and that's going to do it here for us on Studio RPV. I'm Liz Brown Swanson.
I'm Maria Sorrell, and we'll see you next time.